I'm Colt Stevens from C. Stevens Gunworks. The following video you're going to see is an archive of my earlier work. Some of these earlier videos of mine have some great information that I really wanted to repost and preserve. So I hope you enjoy the content and I hope you learn something from this video. Today we're going to be talking about AR15 caliber conversions. This question was submitted by a user who watched our 300 blackout conversion video. And so I'm going to read what he commented and my response to that, and then we're going to talk about what you can do with the standard AR15 platform. So he says, I bought a complete lower and was wondering what my options were as far as calibers. I'm kind of new to guns, so this video had a wealth of info. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for watching. So my response was, there is a ton of information on the topics of calibers to pick from. I may do a more detailed video. You're here this week. So the main calibers I'd recommend for a new to intermediate AR builder, i.e. we're not going to be talking about small frame, and we're also not going to touch on large frame because those are a little bit more specialized. Just standard AR15 magwell works with the 5.56 magazine. Those calibers are 5.56 of course, 300 blackout, 7.62 by 39, 6.5 Grendel, 6.8 special, and 224 Valkyrie. Those are really the most popular calibers out there for the AR15 magwell. 9mm is right up there, but of course that's a different magazine size, so we're going to skip that for right now. That's a little bit more advanced. Past that, I said there are some big bore options, but I don't recommend building those uppers from scratch as they're going to require specialized parts. Those calibers, the 450 Bushmaster, the 458 SOCOM, and the 50 Beowulf. If you're going to go with those, I'd recommend just buying a complete upper receiver. I would not build one like buy a barrel, buy a bolt carrier, and just mix and match your parts. Because first off, if you buy like a Bear Creek, their chamber size is 12.7 by 42. If you buy like Alexander Arms, it's actually 50 Beowulf. It may not be the same chamber size. So you got to kind of be aware that those parts are not mil spec and they may not always work together. So it's really best to get a whole completed upper and not mix match your parts. So if you go down that route, whole set is what you need. Each of the calibers I've mentioned will work on a standard size AR-15 frame. You can also find magwell inserts for pistol caliber builds, but that's a little more advanced of course. There is also large frame, but as you've stated, you already have the standard size lower, so I won't mention those here. 308, 6.5 Creedmoor, there's a lot of other different non-mainstream calibers that you can get in AR-10, like a 458 hammer that's kind of a conversion. Those are really specialized and you really need to know what you're doing. 308 and 6.5 Creedmoor not as much because there's a lot of commercial pre-built options. But for a first timer, I wouldn't recommend it. Just stay with standard size. If you were to ask me in January, I said, I would recommend hands down the 5.56. Now, of course, everybody knows what's going on right now. Ammo is very expensive. As your first caliber, but in today's world, an odd caliber, not mainstream and non-wildcat, which means non-mainstream. Nowadays, we'd consider like 40 S&W not as mainstream as 9mm. Something like 10mm is kind of going up in popularity, where the 40 S&W is kind of going down. If you look in a lot of stores right now, you'll find a lot of 40 where you won't find a lot of 9mm, or it's going to be extremely high priced 9mm where the 40 may be a little lower. So that's what I mean by non-mainstream. Non-wildcat meaning people still make it. Things like 30 Luger, which you can get in an AR caliber right now. People still make ammo for it. 30 Luger for a long time was just something you had to reload yourself. PPU now makes a commercial load for it, so it is possible to get that. So moving on, you want to pick a good caliber that's still in production, but not so mainstream that you can't find ammo for it. Moving away from 5.56. So the other options are really ideal for this. 300 blackout, not so much, because it's still very mainstream. So moving on with our comment here. The 6.5 Grendel or the 224 Valkyrie is what I recommended for really excellent prime candidates for his first build. The conversion for the 6.5 Grendel and the 224 Valkyrie are the same, except for the different parts, of course. You're changing the same 3 parts to do the conversion. Those 3 parts are the bolt carrier head, the magazine, and the bolt. Those are the only 3 you have to change to go from 5.56 to 6.5 Grendel, or the 5.56 to 224. You can, of course, just buy a stripped carrier and put the bolt head on it yourself. These you don't necessarily have to just buy assembled. You can piece them together. The 6.5 Grendel is a little more specialized. You do have to make sure you get the 6.5 Grendel Type 2 bolt carrier head, as opposed to just a standard 7.62x39. They are the same case. 6.5 Grendel Type 2 is a little bit deeper. The case sits a little further into the bolt head, so it aids in extraction, where the 7.62x39 doesn't need as deep a seat in the bolt carrier head. 224 Valkyrie, the 6.8 Special and the 224 Valkyrie case set are the same. They're exactly the same case. I did, however, say that if you want to go ahead and get a 5.56, they're still reasonable. They're not as cheap as they were. Used to be you could build one for about 500 bucks. Nowadays, that same $500 rifle is about 700. If you can get it, of course, the stock is extremely low. But I'd always recommend getting a really common caliber like 5.56 or 300 Blackout, interchangeable uppers. Get a complete 5.56 so when things normalize, you can actually shoot cheaply. Of course, with 5.56 or 223 Remington or 223 Wild now, you can always get the 22 long rifle conversion kit if you just want to plink with it. I don't know if that's the same case in the 224 Valkyrie. I don't know that there's a lot of data on that yet. That'd be something to look into. That is certainly an interesting thing to research more on. Okay, so to summarize what I said to him, first pick nowadays, 224 Valkyrie or 6.5 Grendel with the addition of a 5.56 additional upper, so that whenever things calm down, you can always switch back to a cheaper round for normal use. So that's what I recommend to anybody that's newly building an AR. You have a lower, you want to build it out into something that you can shoot nowadays. Compared to 5.56, 224 Valkyrie, and 6.5 Grendel are excellent cheap options. I think we sell like 6.5 Grendel for $12 a box, compared to like $1 around for 5.56 if you can get it. So with that, we'll go on to the main topic for today. Just what can you build into a standard frame AR-15? This is an excerpt from our AR-15 build class, which we do offer if you ever want to come down and talk to us about AR-15 build class. We start from the ground up. We sell you a strip lower and a rifle kit. You come in and we build it all the way from scratch, and you leave with a complete rifle. If you want any more details, just come in, talk to us, call us on the phone, whatever. So, we'll get into the material here. 7.62x39. We'll go through each caliber and tell you what you need to do to be able to convert it from, say, a standard 16-inch 5.56. Now, the only exception to that is if you have a free float rail already, you're good to go. If you have a front sight gas block, you will need to change that out to something that can readily be modified to a different barrel. Otherwise, you'll have to re-drill the taper pins, and that's a huge ordeal, so I just recommend the free float. You'll get better accuracy out of it anyway. So, the 7.62x39 conversion. You'll need a bolt head, a barrel, a magazine, and a firing pin. The bolt head's pretty self-explanatory. You have to be able to grab onto the cartridge. The barrel has to chamber. The magazine, they give you the different magazines because they're a lot more tapered, the cartridges are. So the magazine itself is really curved to accommodate that cartridge. It looks kind of weird. If you look at that, you'll definitely notice that it's different than a standard AR-15 magazine. The follower is different as well. I think it's only like a 28 round or 26 round magazine that you'll need for the 7.62x39 or the 6.5 Grendel. Those magazines do interchange because they are the same case size. The firing pin is also necessarily changed because the 7.62x39 a lot of the time is burden primed versus boxer primed. They're a lot harder of a primer, and sometimes that can snap the firing pin if you don't have a strong enough firing pin. They are a wear item, of course, so getting a stronger one is not the worst thing in the world. That will prolong the life of your operational ability with that rifle or pistol. So, but definitely a new firing pin is required, especially if you go to like a 5.45x39, which is our next topic. Those are almost always surplus if you get cheap stuff, and that really needs that strengthened firing pin. It will just snap a regular one like nothing. So with that, 5.45x39 bolt, barrel, firing pin, and magazine. The 5.45x39 magazine is closer to a regular one. It's really hard to find this nowadays. We do mention it because we had one here in the store one time. It looks closer to a regular one, but you can tell the follower's different. It's actually closer to like a 21 caliber. It's a little bit less than a 22 223, the actual diameter of the bullet. So you will have to change that out if you want to reliably shoot the 5.45x39. You might be able to get away with a 5.56, but it's always best to get what's actually made for that caliber. So 450 Bushmaster, 458 SOCOM, and I think we have 50 Beowulf on here. As I said in the comment response to our viewer here in the first part of the video, I just recommend getting a full upper. I wouldn't just piecemeal any of those. The 458 SOCOM in particular requires an enlarged ejection port door so it doesn't get hung up in the receiver for extraction. You don't want to try and get a double feed with a case still stuck in the chamber. That's really bad. So I would always just get something that is already built for big bore if you're going to go that way. So we'll move on. 6.8 special, barrel, bolt, and magazine. Same as the 224 Valkyrie, basically the same case, different diameter projectile, as we stated before. The 22 long rifle conversion, bolt carrier group, magazine, and dedicated barrel or 223 barrel. This is where I talked about 224 may work with this. The 223 is actually 224 diameter. 224 Valkyrie is actually 224 diameter. So you're talking 4 thousandths off from actual 22 diameter. So it's kind of like fishtailing through the barrel, which is not ideal. You get past 50 feet, you're probably going to notice some pretty severe accuracy problems. It's not really contacting the rifling as much as it needs to. CMMG does make a quick conversion kit that already has the bolt carrier in the magazine. Sure to get a 22 dedicated barrel. If you just have a 5.56 barrel, that's a really good option. They're like 250 bucks. But then you can just pretty much plank for days if you got enough 22 saved up. So it does give you the option to practice with your rifle, get used to your sights, things like that. We'll touch on the 9mm conversion, a little more advanced than we talked about in the comments with that. You'll need a 9mm whole bolt carrier. It's more like a piston-driven bolt carrier. It's the 9mm blowback. They do make CMMG makes a radial delayed blowback, a little more advanced. That actually does use a gas system. The blowback just takes the inertia of the cartridge projecting the bullet forward to pull that back. It's a blowback system. It's blowing the bolt carrier back. So it does kick a little harder. That's why blowback is not ideal. That's why they came up with the radial delayed blowback. A little better option. And also you will need a 9mm mag block or a 9mm dedicated lower. This is where it gets complicated. You do need one that will either take Glock magazines, Colt magazines. There's a couple other types like MP5 magazines, Sten magazines. You can really go down the rabbit hole with that one. Glock is probably the best choice because it's most readily available. MP5 is kind of hard to find magazines, but they are the better one. I think they hold 30 rounds. You can of course get the Glock, which works with 15, 17, or 33 rounders, or I think they do have a 24 rounder as well. So it's very versatile. You can use a lot of different things with that. I've not tried the Colt magazines. I've not tried the Sten magazines. The Sten, I think, does take some modification to get rented, so it's definitely not the first choice. You will need, of course, the magazine to go with it. You're gonna have to adjust the feed angle is a big thing. We see this a lot with mix mash parts. The magazine angle is not always in line with the barrel. You'll have to adjust the angle so that it's not feeding it like in the top left or the top right. You don't want it to like hang on the edge. If you're using hollow points in particular, you may actually have to like Dremel out the edge of that feed ramp because a lot of the 9mm barrels don't have a feed ramp. So you'll have to create one yourself. Of course, you'll need a barrel chambered in 9mm, of course, to be able to shoot that. So moving on, 45 ACP, this is another small frame option. Now confusingly, this is small frame large. You look at New Frontier Armory or Unbranded AR, who actually makes them for New Frontier. They make a 9mm Glock lower, which is their small frame small. 10mm 40 S&W 357 SIG 45 ACP. Those all go in a small frame large lower, and all that has to do is the size of the Glock magazine is a little bit different dimensionally. So 9mm is one thing, 10mm 45 ACP, all those are a little bit wider, so you have to have a different mag well. I don't know if they offer just the mag block. Those are usually dedicated lowers for that caliber and that magazine well. So moving on, 300 blackout, really simple. It's barrel only. That's why it's such a mainstream round nowadays. It's the same case as a 5.56. So 300 blackout, standard magazine, standard bolt head, different barrel. That's why it's super easy to get 300 blackout confused for 5.56 and have an accidental chambering of the wrong caliber in the wrong barrel. You definitely don't want that because that can blow up your barrel easily. So something to be aware of. A lot of people will like put a little piece around the magazine, like a little piece of tape that says 300 blackout or 5.56 if you have both. What we normally do is, because you don't see a lot of 300 blackout rifles, mostly they're pistols. We always recommend 300 blackout in a pistol because it outperforms the 5.56 inch short barrel, where you really need like 10.5 inch 5.56 to really overperform the 300 blackout. That's kind of where the divergence is. Under 10.5, 300 blackout, over 10.5, 5.56. That's usually what we recommend. You can of course go under, but it's not as optimized for that caliber. You're gonna have a lot of extra powder burn when you go above or below those limits, and you want more powder burn. That's more forces enacted on the projectile, and that's what you need. Higher velocity, more time for those gases to interact and push that barrel out the barrel, the bullet out of the barrel. That's what you need. 50 Beowulf, we already talked about that. Just buy a complete upper. 50 Beowulf does require a different magazine. You can put them in a standard 5.56 magazine, but I'd always just go for the follower because you could break that follower and have problems. So just get the dedicated, that's the short answer. 6.5 Grendel, we talked about that. 6.5 Grendel bolt, barrel, and magazine are what you need for that. Same as the 7.62 by 39. Most of the time, 6.5 Grendel is US made, so you don't have a problem with firing pins. It doesn't hurt to get one. Barnall does import a 6.5 Grendel, and that will require a strengthened firing pin if you're going to be shooting a lot of surplus stuff. So it's always a good idea to get the firing pin. It just prolongs the life of your rifle. That's a good choice. Now, of course, obligatory, we'll say keep in mind that NFA requirements are there when you change barrel length. Under 16 inches is a pistol, over 16 inches is a rifle. Know the laws before you build it. That's the short answer. Don't put a vertical foregrip on a pistol. That's in any other weapon. If you're going to do a pistol, you can do a brace, but not a stock. So keep all that in mind. And if you have questions, certainly reach out to us. We're happy to answer them. Just like our viewer did, we'll respond to you, and you may even get featured in a video. Your comment may be selected. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Please check the link in the description and like and subscribe.